The episode this week is with a correctional nurse, and it does involve some potentially distressing subject matter regarding a death of an inmate in custody. So if this is something triggering for you, you may want to turn away now.
I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz, along with Nurse Erica. We're Nurses Uncorked, the podcast that takes nursing facts with nursing comedy and makes a little cocktail out of it. Welcome back to Nurses Uncorked. I have Nurse Erica here with me again, as always. I'm Nurse Jessica Seitz. We have an amazing episode for you today. You're going to want to tune in and listen to the entire episode. We are privileged and honored to have a nurse with us today by the name of Michelle Heughins. Is a nurse that, if you're not familiar with Michelle's story, you will be. You're gonna recognize the story and what happened to Nurse Michelle. We're going to let Erica take it away, actually, because Erica's going to get into some of the details. But I do want to say thank you, Michelle, for coming on the podcast and joining us here on Nurses Uncorked. We really, really appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I've been looking forward to this for a while. So, brief synopsis, and we'll get into more detail. But for those that aren't familiar, back in 2019. Winston-Salem, North Carolina, at the Forsyth County Jail, there was an inmate, 56 years old, by the name of John Neville, who was in jail on a misdemeanor charge. At one point, he fell out of his top bunk bed and was exhibiting seizure-like symptoms. Medical staff and the correctional officers were called to the cell. 5 correctional officers, we might refer to them as COs during the podcast, and Michelle, a correctional nurse, responded. They went to the cell, and a lot of things transpired. I believe it went on for maybe 40 minutes or more, and we'll get into some of that. But ultimately, the 6 of you were charged with involuntary manslaughter because John Neville was eventually taken to the hospital and died 2 days later. I believe they said the cause of death was positional asphyxiation at that time. And you were charged with involuntary manslaughter. By some inexplicable course of events, it went before the grand jury. And for those that don't know, the grand jury is not a typical jury, so this isn't the trial. Their job is solely to decide if there's enough evidence to move forward and if the people in question should be indicted or not. And so this grand jury, in their air quotes, infinite wisdom, decided not to indict a single one of the correctional officers and only to indict the nurse, Michelle, despite the fact that she was the only one who tried to help. She was not participating in any restraining of this inmate and was, in fact, the one that initiated CPR, and we'll get into all of that. But I'm sure that will ring a bell now with some of you. But thank you, Michelle, for coming on the podcast and for trusting us with your story. I'm so excited to finally talk to you in person. We've spoken a few times, but this is much better. Thank you for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about your background as a nurse and what drew you to correctional nursing?
My entire nursing career, the idea of being able to help a portion of the population that doesn't necessarily receive medical care like they should really drew me. You know, you think about the individuals that are in jails or prisons. A good portion of them don't receive regular medical care because they either can't afford it or it's just not available to them for whatever reason. That appealed to me. I get to help people.
You're an RN? Yeah?
Correct.
Yes. How long have you been a nurse?
Now 11 years. I had to think about that.
I forget.
That's how you know you've been a nurse a long time. You've got to think about it. How would you describe correctional nursing as being different from typical nursing? Like, I mean, for you, obviously, it's going to be common sense, but I think for most people that have never worked in correctional nursing, we're used to being able to respond immediately to things or be able to assess, run in a room. Can you kind of take us through a little bit of like a typical day, and how is it that you get to your the inmates or patients? Like, just kind of take us briefly through that a little bit.
Well, there's different portions to it because you have the daily provider type stuff, your visits with the NP, your visits with the doctor, any of your blood draws and stuff like that. And in that case, you will give your officers lists of people that you need to see that day, and they will bring them down to you in the clinic, in the doctor's office. We also have portions of it, like for med passes. We go to them on their floors with carts and do their med passes there. In the case of like emergencies, we are called to them, to the room by the officers. The officers let us know when there's a problem, and we go to the room that they were told, and then we have to be let into the room by the officers, and the officers are with us the whole time. We're never left alone with an inmate.
All right. So I would think that that would be one of the major differences with correctional nursing versus any other kind of nursing. If there's, for example, a code situation, we as nurses often are running the code. We are going to be the first one to run in the room and start barking orders unless there happens to be a physician there. But for you, in your case, you have to have permission, essentially, or be granted access to do anything physical to come in contact with an inmate, right?
Essentially, yes. You have to be let into the room, but once you're in the room, you're in charge to a point. But it is always security first. Security worries about my safety, their safety, the inmate safety, any other inmates around safety. It's a little bit different in regards to that. We don't just run to the door and open it. It has to be open for us. And there has to be an officer in the room with us at all times.
That's a whole different mindset, honestly. What drew you to correctional nursing? What do you really enjoy about it the most?
Helping people that don't get the help they need outside. There's been I've had a few inmates where they were actually diagnosed in jail with a chronic care issue that they either didn't know they had, or were told that they had, but were not told how to properly take care of it. They didn't get the education that they needed. And we are able to do more one-on-one with them in regards to their education and their chronic diseases, and how to treat them better, and how to prolong and improve their health that they didn't get on the street because they didn't have the chance to.
Yeah, that must be rewarding. And your patient population, often this is the first time they're getting any care. Yeah, so that must be really rewarding when you catch something or diagnose something like that and start the treatment and see them turn around.
Yeah. A good example is we had a young man. He was less than 30. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes by us because of how he was feeling and things that were going on with his body. And he was complaining, coming down for doctor's office visits and whatnot. And we finally let's do a blood work on you. And we got his A1C back, and he was over 17.
Ooh, yikes.
Wow.
Yeah. When we got those results back, we were like, hi, yeah, you need to come down and see us. We need to start you on some treatment. But when we gave him the list of symptoms, he was like, but I always feel like that. I always have that. I've always felt like that. I didn't realize that wasn't normal. So yeah, we were able to get him diagnosed and get him treated. And before he left, his A1C was down to 7.2.
Oh, wow. That's great.
That's awesome. Yay. He probably felt better.
That made us feel good. Made us feel good. Made him feel good. He's like, 6 months later, he's like, I've never felt this good in my life. This is awesome. And for him, it wasn't
prison.
Woo! for him, it wasn't that he couldn't go to the doctor. It's he didn't. He didn't realize that wasn't normal. It was just, I'm getting older. I'm not 18 years old. I'm not 10 feet tall and bulletproof no more. So this is just a fact of getting older. It's like, no, you're sick. Yeah, we're going to fix that. You're going to feel better. So yeah, that felt good.
Can you take us back to that day in 2019, and you were the correctional nurse there at Forsyth County Jail? And can you kind of tell us in your recollection how this played out?
Sure. Normal overnight shift. Did my normal med pass like I do. Uh, Took care of any of my detoxers, any of my normal everyday stuff, and had a call over the radio for a charge call to this particular room. Get down there, get let in, and get told that his roommate said that he fell off his bunk and he thinks he was having a seizure. It was not witnessed by myself, medical staff, or officers. By the time the officers got there, he was just laying on the floor. Let me in, started doing an assessment. He was when we first got in there, he was almost like sleeping. He was breathing, he was moving, but he was sleeping. Wasn't responding at first to verbal commands. Did a sternal rub on him and he popped his eyes open. Sternal rubs hurt.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was, for lack of better description, he was post-ictal. He was confused about where he was, what was going on, and trying to calm him down. And then he basically closed his eyes and stopped responding. So we did another sternal rub on him, got him to wake up. A lot of details in there. Tried to get a set of vitals on him. That was not possible. He started fighting back. And anyone who's ever tried using a manual BP cuff, if they're flexing their arm, you aren't getting an accurate reading.
Right.
And he's a big guy too. But he started fighting, and no amount of trying to talk to him, trying to calm him down. He was just fighting. And so they started to restrain him, which made him fight more. And eventually, he tried to bite one of the officers. So they put a spit mask on him so that he couldn't bite them.
Okay.
And when he started to get really rambunctious, I was asked to leave the room. Again, security first. Is always security first. So they asked me to leave the room. I stepped out of the room. They tried restraining him. Ended up putting shackles on him, handcuffs and feet cuffs. Got him calmed down enough. But still, he was responding, but he was confused. They decided to get him up and move him to another room where he's by himself. There's no roommates or anything like that. Nothing that he could hurt himself on. It's called a single cell. They got him to stand up, and he walked over to the restraint chair. They got him into the restraint chair, down to the floor where the single cells are, and they have what they like a general room for classes and stuff like that. But they also have room for us to do any like medical stuff that we need to do, wound cares and all that stuff. And again, identified myself to him, tried to explain what was going on, attempted to get another set of vitals on him, or get a set of vitals, sorry. And as soon as the blood pressure cuff started inflating, he started fighting, and I just couldn't get vitals on him. And again, the whole time trying to explain to him what was going on, officers talking to him, and I don't know if he wouldn't listen or couldn't.
Right.
I'm still not sure. So they brought him over to the single cell, and they do their method of getting them into the cell, especially when he's combative, wearing a bite mask because he tried to bite one of the officers. When they attempted to get the handcuffs off of him, the key broke in it. So they had to get
perfect storm
bolt cutters, which was a giant mess. If it could go wrong, it did go wrong. They don't obviously keep bolt cutters right there next to the cell, so we had to wait for the bolt cutters to be brought up. They weren't big enough, strong enough, whatever, so they had to wait for another set to be brought up to get cut out of. In the meantime, he is restrained, and they do restrain prone on the stomach. For most of it, he was fighting the officers and the hold, yelling. But he eventually stopped fighting, so they were able to relax a little bit off of him. They weren't holding him as tight, kind of thing. They were able to get the cuffs off him. They got the shackles off of him. And then they backed out of the room and closed the door, because this is what happens when you move to single cell. You give them a couple of minutes to calm down, and then you're allowed to go back in.
Okay.
I went to the door, and I couldn't tell if he was breathing or not. I couldn't see through the glass if he was breathing or not. So I told them. We went back in, realized he was not breathing, couldn't get a heart rate, and we started CPR and AED and calling EMS and all that. And it felt like a lot longer than it really was, but we were able to get his heart rate back in the facility. And then he was transported to the hospital, and I found out that they worked on him for a while. They were able to stabilize him, but then 2 days later, they disconnected life support for him because he was brain dead, from what I understand. A few months later, I was contacted by the SBI, State Bureau of Investigation. Anytime there's a death in a facility, the facility is investigated by an outside source, which is the SBI. So he took my statement over the phone. At that point, I was no longer in North Carolina. I was at my next contract as a travel nurse. And then a few months later, I got a phone call telling me that I had charges. Me and 5 officers had charges for involuntary manslaughter.
And your life changed.
Did you have any, I was going to say, were you worried that something like that would happen, or that was never in the back of your mind?
Never in the back of my mind.
Yeah,
In
like
fact,
most nurses. Yeah, we never would think that would happen to us, because obviously things happen. People
job.
pass away, and when you're not doing something of malintent, you never would imagine that you would be charged. Yeah.
Now, as a matter of fact, when I spoke to the SBI officer, I was told that they were just doing their normal investigation. It was never stated that they were investigating for the intent of charging anybody. It was just they were doing their investigation because of death in the facility.
A big part of this case, in my opinion, was the restraining of him, being in a prone position. For those that don't know, that is face down. And it was very, again, my opinion, reminiscent of George Floyd and things like that we have seen. As you had no part of the restraining of him whatsoever. That was just the correctional officers. And eventually, the sheriff, actually, I read, ended up banning the bent leg prone restraint, which is what the position or maneuver that was used on him as a result of this. And I think that is very telling. Do you have any opinions of the way that he was restrained or the way that was handled?
First, let me say that everyone has seen the video of George Floyd. He had an officer with his knee on his neck.
Right.
It is not like that in jails or prisons. It's not supposed. Nothing is on the neck. There is never anything on the neck. He was restrained at the arms and at the legs. Yes, his legs, they fold them up at the knee and they press them towards the buttocks, and then someone holds that. It helps limit their movement from kicking somebody and from getting up and hurting somebody. I don't really have an opinion on the holds because I am not versed in the holds. I am not versed in trying to restrain somebody, especially somebody of his size. So I don't have an opinion on what officers are trained to do. I mean, that's what they do. They know better than I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have any interaction with John prior to this day? Had you seen him? No. Okay.
Nope.
I heard he had a history of asthma, so I didn't know if I mean, at least that's what I've read online, that I didn't know if he had to come in, you know, to see you guys or get a checkup or something. I mean, he hadn't been there that long though, I don't think. So I don't know how long it takes to get those things
Um,
situated, but
when they come in through intake, we do a medical intake as well, where we ask them, prior medical history, any medications that they're on, and that sort of stuff. So that would have been covered then. And if he needed to have like a daily treatment or a neb treatment or something like that, it would have been entered then. If he had problems while he was there, he would have basically put in what we call a sick call to see a nurse to have his stuff updated, added to, whatever. But yeah, no, he hadn't been there very long. He had been there
okay.
less than 48 hours.
Part of the indictment was that his civil rights were violated because medical conditions were ignored. That is what they claimed. And I think that maybe goes back to the history of asthma. I'm not really sure, but it kind of seemed when you watch the videos, and I want to say I don't recommend that anybody go and watch these videos. They are pretty tough to watch. They're lengthy. They're broken up into different parts, and it's not easy to watch. So I don't recommend it, but they are out there if you do want to see it. But it almost at one point seemed kind of like an air hunger to me. In the beginning, he's answering. He's definitely like somewhat communicating. I mean, not a great deal. He's making sounds, and then eventually he stops making sounds and stops responding. And did you get that impression at all of like an air hunger, or were you worried about airway or any of that?
Yeah, from where I was, especially once he was actually moved to the single cell, I couldn't see him. I physically could not put eyes on him because it is a small room and there was already 5 officers in there with him. So at that point, I am relying on my officers who are first responder trained to let me know if there's a problem, because I can't necessarily hear what's going on. You're in a loud jail that echoes, and there's a lot of inmates in there who, when they see things going on, can make a lot of noise. So I can't necessarily hear what's going on. I can't see what's going on. At that point, I am relying on my officers who are first responder trained to let me know if there's a problem.
That's a good point. They're first responder trained. I never thought of that. They are. And you are forced to leave the cell. You can see that on the video that you are outside the cell, watching through the window as much as you can, but it's not an easy view. It's obscured, it's far away. You can't really see, you can't do a proper assessment from the window outside the door, right?
No. No. As a matter of fact, when all of this is going on, not only do you have the officers in the room, you have an officer standing just outside of the door with a video camera. So all the officers have body cams, but they're also videotaping outside of the room to get an overall view. So no, I cannot see him at all. I am relying on my officers to tell me this. And quite honestly, when he stopped,
I was going to say, I watched yesterday. It was a 20-minute clip that I watched. And in that 20-minute clip, you don't come into the scene at all, I think, until the last few minutes of that 20-minute clip, and like Erica was saying, it is a very hard video to watch, because, I think that's why I felt it was important to bring up the differences between correctional nursing versus typical nursing in the hospital. You feel like your instinct is like more intervention, like assessment, but the ability to assess can't really be done until this inmate is at a point that he's not a threat anymore or he's not combative. He's not, trying to get away. So,
correct.
I found it not shocking, but I'm like, the actual nurse couldn't even get in there to physically see him or lay eyes on him. And when you did, it was very brief. And then I saw the part where they shut the door and you're at the window and your eyes never left the window. Like you were looking. And I think at that point you were really maybe starting to get a feel of something's not right here. Like
Correct.
it's not like you looked at the window and you walked away. I mean, your eyes were fixed in the window the entire time. But it's just, like Erica said, it's a very hard video to watch. And it definitely, it's just a whole different ball game. It's a whole different thing than what we're used to, but
It's a different world.
yeah, for sure. And I think you were saying earlier about George Floyd, and I think the comparison may come in because of the words he uttered. I can't breathe. You hear him say that, and we are trained, if you're talking, you're breathing, like,
If you're yelling, you're breathing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
if you're talking in complete whole sentences, you're yelling at me, you're swearing at me, you're breathing.
Yes. So you were watching from the window and eventually you said, I don't see him breathing. And you had to wait to be let back in the cell. You had to basically be granted permission. And you went in and you listened to him with a stethoscope. And eventually you said, there's no heart rate. You call for an AED, for a code essentially, and you started compressions. You were the only one there administering any kind of medical care, interventions, assessment, really. Is there anything?
Well, one correction on that.
Sure.
Is that the officers are first responder trained. So while I was doing compressions, another officer was handling the ambu bag, giving breaths, helping me with counting. And there was officers there that could jump in if I got too tired to perform CPR. Okay. So
good to point out. Thank you.
It wasn't all by myself, but it was by myself.
Yeah.
I think the point I was trying to make is that you initiated the medical care. You are the one that recognized there was an issue and started to do something about it. In retrospect now, is there anything that you feel like you wish you had done differently, that you could have done differently?
There's always something you wish you did different.
Yeah, of course.
But ultimately, in this case, there really wasn't anything that I could change, unfortunately.
Yeah. So after this happened, you kept working, right? How long did the investigation go on? Or did you keep working? Were you let go from this position?
No. At the long story short, I'm a travel nurse for WellPath. I started out with WellPath as a site nurse at a facility in Massachusetts because that's where I lived. And then I became a travel nurse where I go to WellPath facilities as a travel nurse. So I already know like the computer system and all that stuff. I just need to learn each site's individual preferences and what have you, how they run. I was working at another facility in the area, and I was asked to come in and cover a shift because I was listed as like a per diem nurse for this facility because I was working in the area. I was covering a shift for somebody else that night.
I did not know that. Oh my goodness. I did not know that. Wow. That's just like added insult to injury. You weren't even supposed to be there.
Yeah. And the nurse that I was covering for, when everything was said and done, I got a phone call from her. Oh my God. But yes, I was covering for somebody else that night. Any time that there is a death in a facility, every facility and my company does what they call a mortality review. They all the higher ups from the facility and from the medical get together and they go over everything. They go over the
like an M&M.
They go over all the medical Yes. They go over all of my documentation, all of the officers' documentation, everything. And they do that within 30 days of a death in a facility to make sure that we didn't do anything wrong. I was cleared by my company during no mortality review, long before the charges ever came out. But this happened in December of 2019, and the charges came through the end of June, beginning of July of 2020. So 6 months later.
What was the response that you got from the public, from social media, from news outlets? Like, was it intense? Was it more than you thought it would be? Was it something you were uncomfortable with, or were people supportive? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I guess it depends on which aspect you're talking about. Social media wise, I shut everything down.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. I can attest to that because I couldn't find you.
No, that was the very first thing my lawyers told me to do. Shut down your social media, disappear. You do not want to deal with any of the backlash. So I shut down my Facebook, I shut down my Instagram, I shut down everything. I cut
Okay,
myself
so you
off from
didn't have,
social
you weren't
media.
seeing that kind of stuff, like somebody trying to make a comment on your Facebook page or that kind of thing.
No, I was not seeing it. I had my circle of family and friends were watching all of that for me. I have some very good, very, 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 very good support system, and they were all watching it for me. But in regards to, like, I still kept an eye on. Google yourself, see what pops up first.
Yeah,
it's ugly.
Yeah.
Most of the public was either completely behind me, especially nurses. Oh my God, nurses. You guys were feral. They were either completely behind me. They were either completely behind me or like behind me because they didn't think I did anything wrong, but they didn't understand everything. Or they would make comments like, oh, well, she should have done this. She should have done that. Why didn't she do this? And then somebody else would jump in and, again, tell me you don't work in correctional nursing. Well, tell me you don't work in correctional nursing. So, but the vast majority of the social media part of it was supportive. There were a few not nice comments, but they weren't really like lashing out at me per se. But again, I canceled myself off social media, so I wasn't there to get it.
Nurses were pissed. There were some protests. I think most nurses were really supportive of you and very angry that not only that a nurse was being charged, but that you were the only one that was being charged. There was a lot of support for you, I can tell you, in the nursing community.
Yes, there was.
That's where a lot of the anger came from, was the fact that when push came to shove, I was the only one indicted, not the officers who were holding him. That's where a vast majority of the anger came from. Which
how do you feel about that?
Too,
Are you angry? What was your reaction when you were the only one indicted?
There was, if I was being taped, there would have been a lot of bleeps.
Yeah, I'm sure.
There was a lot of anger. There's still a lot of anger. Trying to work through it.
And what was the rationale for that? Because you were the actual nurse, you were the registered nurse. I mean, is that the reasoning? Like, why did they only select you? It doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. I've never had that question answered.
I've heard, tell me if this is correct, that North Carolina is a state that is known to be a little untrusting of the medical profession, really more kind of supportive of law enforcement. Would you say that that's true or played a part?
I honestly don't know. For the most part, my position was a little bit different than most of the medical staff there. Because again, I'm a travel nurse. Mm-hmm. So I'm not there for years and years and years. I'm only there for a couple of months. So I didn't get that. I didn't see that. It wasn't directed at me. So I'm not really sure if I can answer that question.
Yeah.
No,
the day that you found out you were being charged, Can you tell us a little bit about the emotions of that day? I cannot even imagine.
Uh, wow. The emotions of that day. The first one was shock. Because I was I was actually in the drive-through getting my lunch when I found out. And the poor lady at the drive-through window, oh, that poor lady. I feel so bad for her. I think I scared her because the person who told me about it, I might have screamed some expletives. And I was at the window. She was giving me my food. Yeah, I think she might have thrown it at me.
I bet you weren't hungry anymore. I can tell you that.
No,
Yeah.
no. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that the next day, my lunch that was still sitting on my passenger seat got tossed in the trash. Yeah. But the biggest thing for me at that point was I work in a jail. I've just been told that there's a warrant for my arrest in another state.
Yeah.
I work in a jail. There's
Yeah.
a warrant for my arrest.
Uh-huh.
I can't go back to work.
Right. I don't think
might be
anybody would
arrested.
have thought of that. Yeah. That's a very precarious position to be
I
in.
did. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I was in Virginia and the warrant was in North Carolina, so it hadn't come through in the 2 hours from when it had been posted. But yeah, I sat in the parking lot. I'm supposed to be on a half-hour lunch. I was out there for an hour and 15 minutes waiting to get a hold of my boss back at corporate going, what's going on? And do I go back into work to clock out and get my stuff? Or what do I do? But eventually I went into the facility and grabbed my HSA and my director of nursing and said, "Oh, I gotta go. I can't be here. I gotta go." They're like, "Why?" I'm like, "I'm being charged criminally with involuntary manslaughter," and they both went, "Oh, you need to get out of here. Let's go."
Yeah.
So yeah, clocked out, packed my stuff, and went back to the hotel. And I honestly could not tell you about the trip from the jail to my hotel. I don't remember a single second of the scenery when I was driving because I had to get my husband on the phone, who was in Massachusetts. I was in Virginia. My husband's in Massachusetts. And I had to call him.
And what was
tell him
his
what going on.
reaction to all of this?
Shocked silence at first. Because at first, when he first picked up the phone, he realized it was me, obviously caller ID. He couldn't understand what I was saying. I was crying too hard.
Right.
I was crying too hard. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. Got me to calm down enough that I could tell him what was going on, as far as I knew. And yeah, go back to the hotel.
Must have been terrifying. I can't imagine.
I can't imagine it either. I'm trying to put myself in your shoes, and I can't imagine what that feeling. You must feel helpless, like literally helpless. Like there's what am I gonna do? Right.
What do I do? What do I do? How do I get out of this hole that I am suddenly in? Yeah.
Well, and how do I, as a nurse, end up being the criminal in this situation? You know, we go into nursing to help, right? This shouldn't be a criminal issue.
Right.
It's so many aspects to wrap your head around.
Honestly, I never in a million years ever thought that I would be arrested for doing my job. So
yeah, this
was all new territory, and I had no stomach. It basically fell out my feet, and my stomach was gone. I didn't know what I was doing. Fortunately, I work for an absolutely amazing company, and
tell us about that.
2 hours, they had already hired my lawyer for me within 2 hours.
Amazing. This is WellPath, and they're a third-party company that prisons, jails, and I think locked psych units they contract with them to bring in medical staff for these correctional facilities, right?
Correct. Years and years and years ago, every facility was either run by city, state, county, however you want to look at it, and they had their own medical staff. Over the years, they have decided that private contractors were more cost effective for them. So they would hire companies like WellPath who would bring in their own medical staff. And yeah, they provide all their medical for them.
And they paid for your entire defense?
Yes, absolutely everything.
That is incredible.
That is
They
not
hired,
typical. That is not typical at all. I mean,
they actually, they have a contract with a local law office that handles any of their smaller stuff, civil stuff. And they basically called them and said, "Who do you recommend for criminal? Give me your top 5." She
Wow.
gave them the top 5, and she flat out told them, "Here's my top 5. Obviously, you want number 1. Period. End all. Be all. That's who you want." They called them and they said, "Yeah, we can take on the case, no problem." Within 2
Wow.
hours, I had a criminal defense team that the absolute best in North Carolina, absolute best.
Wow. And not only did they
Within,
pay
like I
for
said, within 2
your
hours, I had
defense, they kept you on the payroll, right? Because you eventually had to
absolutely
temporarily surrender your nursing license. So you could not work as a nurse, but they kept you on the payroll doing non-clinical jobs, right?
correct. Absolutely, yep.
Amazing.
what a great
They
company. Yeah.
they and again, it goes back to the mortality review that they do themselves. They had already cleared me in January. So when all this came around, they were like, "No, no, 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 no. We don't agree with this. This is wrong. This is bull crap. We stand behind you 100%. You are not facing this alone. Um, we're hiring your attorneys. We will get you the best defense team that we can find, and you will not have to worry about your paycheck. You will not lose your home. You will not lose your car. You will not be on the street with nothing." Yeah, they absolutely stood behind me 100%. And even to this day, they're still, "Okay, so what are we doing?" Absolutely amazing company to work for.
How long were you out of your nursing role? Like, how long did
I'm,
that last?
I'm still out of it right now. I'm still waiting for all my licenses to finish clearing up.
Oh, wow. Just a
So
long period of time.
altogether, I was charged in July of 2020. My last day on the floor was the day I was charged. Then I did temporary voluntary suspension of license pending criminal trials for all the states that I had a license in, because Massachusetts is not a compact state. So any state that I went to, I had to have a license by endorsement for my Mass license. I've got my Mass cleared up. I've got my North Carolina cleared up. I've got to get my Virginia cleared up before I can switch to North Carolina compact.
So were
Wow.
you asked by the Board of
it's
Nursing to
crazy.
voluntarily surrender your license?
That was an agreement that my civil attorney and their attorney came to. That way, they needed to do their investigation from the charges, and they couldn't do an investigation until the criminal trial was done, because that could impact my criminal trial. So they did. Both of them agreed to temporary suspension pending the criminal trial. But
What was that like,
dropped,
having to
they
give
were
up your
able to.
license? I can't imagine.
You ever been kicked in the face? That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Yeah, being told that everything that you have worked so hard for, blood, sweat, tears, yeah, we're taking that away from you. You can't do that no more. And we don't know how long you're not going to be able to do that for, if you'll ever be able to do that again. You know, I think if you had ripped my heart out of my chest, it would have hurt less.
Yeah, it's got to feel like a sucker punch. Yeah, exactly.
I felt like a nuclear weapon had been dropped in the middle of my life and exploded.
Yeah.
Do you did you know much about Rondas' case when this happened to you? Had you heard about it? Were you following it, or
No,
do you
at
feel
the time
like
I didn't.
do you feel like you're in a club? I know that sounds horrible, but when I think about Redonda, the next image I think about you, and then I think about is it Christina or Christine?
Christiane Gainey.
The other, yes, Christiane. Those three faces come to mind to me. Like, have you ever talked with any of these girls or had any contact with them
Oh,
because
I
of
have
the
a story.
circumstances that have happened?
I have not spoken to Christiane Gain.
Okay.
Yeah. But
I take it maybe Ronda you have. I want to hear this.
Yeah. So this all kind of wrapped up right before Redonda and I went on the Costa Rica trip that we co-hosted. And so Redonda and I are in the hotel the first
day. It was
day.
like the day before.
Yeah, like right before. Yeah. So the day before all the travelers arrived, Redonda and I are in the hotel and we're just talking. And I mentioned Michelle and I'm like, did you hear about the outcome of her case, which we'll come back to? And she had not heard. And I told her and she started to cry, immediately started to cry. And she's like, do you have her number? And I'm like, yeah. So they start texting, then they get on the phone. And it was just like a beautiful thing to watch. And Redonda was so happy for you. Like, honestly, that was one of the highlights of the trip for me, even though it had nothing to do with the trip, getting to see that. It was amazing. And it is kind of this, like, who else would understand what that's like? No one. There's only a handful, right?
I didn't know that, but I would assume it has to be like an immediate like bond with somebody, because it's like you can't understand what it's like to go through that unless you've gone through it and you're finally talking to the one person that understands what you've gone through, but was there some comfort in that, like in being able to talk to somebody that got it? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not the only one out there. You're not all by your little lonesome. It is a crappy club to be a part of.
Yeah, it's not one you want to join, but
I do not want to be president of that club.
Do not recommend.
There's a few things that have been ticked off my bucket list because of this case, so
I would love to plan something one day. I don't know how feasible or weird this is, but God, I would love to plan something that had this club of, unfortunate members, right? You, Redonda, Julie Tao back in the day, who was the first nurse criminally charged,
yeah.
And like have some kind of a forum.
I highly recommend that we don't get together anywhere near a police station, though.
Right.
Throw that out there.
It's just crazy that nurses are being criminally charged, and not doctors. We don't see them being criminally charged. It's just nurse after nurse after nurse. I mean, do you have an opinion on that? This what I call a witch hunt.
It was just all of a sudden. 2 years ago, we were heroes. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, oh wait, no. This nurse did this, and this nurse did this, and this one's being charged with this. It's like all of a sudden we were being attacked. And I mean, I wish it hadn't been me, but at the same time, I think of some of the nurses it could have been. And I don't think they would have gotten through it as well, because they don't have enough of a support system like I do. So as weird as it sounds, I'm glad it was me and not somebody else that I work with. How do you tell a nurse, somebody who has worked, did the 4 years of school plus all the clinicals plus this plus that, you're working 12-hour shifts, 14-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, 3 to 5 to 7 days a week for however long. Oh wait, here comes COVID. Now you have to wear a mask, and you have to wear an N95, and you have to wear this, and you got to do this, and you can't touch this one. And oh yeah, now we're going to take away your livelihood. We're going to take away your license. We're going to tell you can't be a nurse no more. There's a few people that I know personally would not be able to handle that.
And you were facing up to 15 years in prison, correct?
Yeah. So I think the max on it was like 7 to 10.
Oh, okay. That must have been absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and you of all people know what prison is like. Like, that is even a completely crazy perspective,
Yeah.
like, because you already know. I mean, were there any point that you visualized if this is what it's like? Because we've talked with Redonda about this. Like, she said that if she did serve time, she was going to make the best out of it. She said, I was going to go, she was trying to envision what her life would be like if that happened. Like, she was going to try to befriend the inmates and
Write a
do
book.
gardening. And she had all of these mental plans already because she was trying to prepare herself. Did you ever feel like, did you put yourself in those shoes, or did you try not to think about it?
I didn't get as far as, if I go to prison, this is what I'm going to do. I think it stayed at, holy shit, I could go to prison.
Yeah.
I didn't get beyond that mentally because I couldn't. I had to get through today, and then I got to get through tomorrow, and I got to get through this and that. And again, I had an awesome legal team. They helped me tremendously. If I woke up at 3:00 in the morning from a horrible nightmare, I could call my lawyer and go, dude, talk me down off the ledge.
Yeah.
They were there for me. So, but I also had, my family.
What was your attorney's
husband.
name? We should give them a shout out.
It was, his name is James Coomey. He was the head, but I also had Claire Rauscher and Ripley Rand.
Okay.
From, it was Womble Bond. Womble Bond out of North Carolina.
Okay.
If you ever need a criminal attorney, that's who you want.
That's the one.
They are phenomenal.
You mentioned shutting down your social media on your attorney's advice. And I have to tell you, because we've talked about it, but you went radio silent. Not just radio silent. You dropped off the face of the earth, because I tried for so long to find you. I scoured social media. I tried to find any contact information. I even emailed your attorneys, which I now know you knew about at the time, but nobody responded. And then fast forward till September of last year. This is over 2 years after you're indicted. I get a random message from someone, and before I know it, you and I are on the phone, and you are sharing amazing news with me. So can you tell everyone what ultimately ended up happening?
With the civil or the criminal?
Well, let's start with civil.
Okay, because you got to remember, I was fighting both at the same time.
Yeah.
About 2 years, just before the 2-year mark, in I think it was September or October of 2021, the family filed a civil lawsuit against, I think there was 10 of us listed, myself, WellPath, the officers, the sheriff, the county, the state, all that. Ultimately, there's 10 of us, I believe, in it. And we were kind of separate because WellPath and I had our own attorney, and then they had their attorney for the city and the county and all that. They settled. And we tried to settle in the very beginning, and they wouldn't accept our offer, and they wouldn't negotiate with us. So we actually ended up doing deposition, which, again, off my bucket list, I never want to do a deposition ever, ever, ever again.
Can you talk about that for a minute? Because I don't think nurses understand how important and how scary a deposition is. Can you talk about that for a minute?
A deposition, you are sitting at the head of the table, and directly in front of you is a camera. And then on one side is your attorney and anybody that they have for themselves. And on the other side is the opposing counsel and anybody they have on their side, like their client. And basically you are asked questions from both sides, and everything is videotaped. It's right on your face the whole time, so that they have a video that they can go back to and read into what you don't say, read your facial expressions, read your hand motions, which I talk with my hands. So that was horrible. I almost had to sit on my hands.
There could be a long time between a deposition and it going to trial. And so maybe you don't remember that you said something a certain way. 3 years ago in a deposition. And they will, when you're now on the stand, they will, just latch on to that and say, well, that's not what you said in your deposition.
Yep.
Allow me to remind you on page, 347 here, you actually, they will use your own words against you. It's a big deal.
Absolutely. They will use your body language against you too. I did the deposition. I was told that they were going to be bringing in the officers for depositions. They were also going to be bringing in 2 higher ups from one from my facility from WellPath, one of the doctors, regional, to give their side of it, what they see for correctional nursing versus regular nursing and all that, for their expert opinion. And they actually ended up settling out of court before anybody else had to give a deposition. My name was removed from it. I was not found liable. It was transitioned over to just WellPath, paid the settlement. So my name was removed from it completely.
Is it public how much the settlement was?
That was no.
Okay.
No, they signed a non-disclosure. They could not reveal it. If they reveal how much it was, they have to give it back.
Okay.
And
I can tell you that it was less than what the officers, the other group, which was the officers, the sheriff, the city, the county, all of that, they were all lumped in together on one, and ours was less than theirs.
And so then what about the criminal case? What ended up happening with that?
The civil trial finished. They settled. All the paperwork got filed. I guess at one point, the lawyers from the civil trial did reach out to the district attorney and basically told him, the civil has been settled. The family wants nothing to do with this nurse going on trial. They want nothing to do with it. They don't see the point of it.
Good.
Justice has been served as far as they're concerned. And so he dropped the charges.
Amazing. They were all dismissed against you.
I got a random phone call on a Thursday afternoon from my attorney saying, hey, so by the way, they dropped the charges.
Were you like, what? Oh my God.
I did the, huh? He's like, yeah, so the district attorney dropped the charges. I'm like, so I don't gotta go to court? I don't gotta go to trial? I can have my life back? He's like, you can have your life back. I went, okay, I need to go out with a bottle because holy crap.
Were you in the drive-through, Michelle, at this point?
No, fortunately, I was in my kitchen at that point. I think I was cooking lunch. I might have dropped my spatula though, so.
But what a different phone call from the first phone call, Just a
honestly,
shock, but a good shock. Yeah.
Yeah. The same level of shock, I think. I think they balance each other out.
3 years of hell that they put you through to get to that outcome. Yeah.
It was actually more than 3 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was charged in July and the charges were dropped in, was it November?
September.
I don't know.
September.
Yeah. It was a little bit over 3 years.
Have you ever spoken with the family, Michelle? Or no? His family? No.
The son, who was the head of the civil suit, was in my deposition, but I did not speak to him. I was told not to.
Where are you at with your license now? How much longer do you think until this will finally be resolved and you can get back to working as a nurse?
Technically, as of right now, I can work in Massachusetts and North Carolina.
Okay.
I'm waiting for Virginia to finish their investigation on my disciplinary. Once that is squared away, then I can get my compact license in North Carolina, and I can go back to work in 41 different states now.
Okay. And are you excited or nervous to go back to work?
Yes.
Both. All of it.
Fair.
For me, I know I have that little voice in the back of my head. Everyone's got it. Some are louder than others. Can you go back to working on the floor? Can you go back into that scenario and possibly have this happen again? I don't know yet. find out.
Yeah. After everything you've been through, would you recommend correctional nursing, and would you recommend nursing in general to up and coming nurses, students?
Yes,
Really?
because ultimately, yeah, it's a scary job. Don't get me wrong, it is a scary job. But so is walking out your front door. You can get hit by a bus walking down the street.
Yeah.
You do your job to the best of your ability. Follow all the rules, dot your I's, cross your T's, document. Oh my God, document everything. And ultimately, that's all you can do. But yeah, and I would absolutely recommend correctional nursing. If this is your calling, do it. It is a beast of a completely different nature than any other form of nursing you've ever done, but it is so fulfilling. Absolutely so fulfilling. Yes, you've got your crap, but every nurse has to deal with crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely recommend it.
Did documentation play in?
Save me?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Because remember that this happened in December of 2019. The charges came down in July of 2020. So 6 months later, how many patients have I seen in 6 months?
Yeah.
Do I remember every little detail? Absolutely not. I remember the basics and the generic. Even there was even stuff that I forgot that was not in my documentation, stupid little things that I was reminded of by seeing the videos. So yeah, document.
Have you thought about writing a book? Has anybody brought that up to you?
Yeah. That's not me. Somebody else wants to write it. I'll dictate. But
Okay.
yeah, no,
you need like a ghostwriter.
Yes, there you go. Our chief nursing officer for WellPath, she's the head nurse out of all of them for the company. She has started questioning me if I would do visits to different sites and do education.
You need to do that.
Oh, wow.
You need to do that. Absolutely. You should do that.
She's like, you need to tell, especially all the new nurses, document all of this.
Yes.
Yep. It's so important. It's so important.
She wants me to do educational, at least, if nothing else, for the WellPath nurses at the minimum. So we'll see.
Do it.
We'll see what happens.
Do it.
I want to say, I know I've just met you, but I love seeing you smile. Like, you have such a contagious smile. You really do. Like, and
Thank you.
It's nice to see that at least as horrible as everything was that you went through, at least finally things came to an end
done.
and you're moving on and hopefully can get back to what you love doing. So that
I honestly recommend humor to get through life.
And correctional nurses have the best sense of humor. I swear, of all the nurses I've come in contact, it's dark. We all have a dark sense of humor, but correctional nurses are special.
I think ours is worse.
Are a very special group, and I love them breed. Because it doesn't matter what video or joke I make. They're like, yeah, that's nothing. I love it.
I will give you a small example of the dark humor that not just as a correctional nurse, but even my children have gathered, because I'm a correctional nurse. My husband's a mechanic. He works with tow truck drivers. Yeah. My son, when we first found out about these charges, he's like, Mom, I got to be honest with you. I did not see this on my 2020 bingo card. Mom arrested for murder. See, that was not on my 2020 bingo card. He goes, Dad, yes. Mom, no.
Now that's funny. I mean, I like that kid.
My children are unique.
Kids, they know how to bring some levity to a situation and try to.
I love it.
You have to. And nursing's like that too. Yeah. If you don't laugh, you're gonna continue crying. So
yeah, what else? Have a bleeding ulcer within 6 months. So you gotta laugh.
Yep.
Well, I've been very lucky that my support circle is dark humor, so we're good.
That's great.
It has been my pleasure to get to know you as a person. I admire you.
Thank you.
Everything that you've been through, I cannot imagine. I know that it may not feel like this at times, but the strength that you have exhibited for the nursing community, unmatched. We need more nurses like you to fight back, and you fought back. You didn't just like take a plea deal, you were like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. We're going to fight this. And you did. And I'm so glad that it had a good outcome for you.
Me too.
Me too. And honestly, if one person can see what I went through and just, yeah, that's what I want to do, then it was worth it. It was worth it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so
Thank you.
much for coming on.
Thank you guys for doing this.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time on the next Nurses Uncorked.